And now, the amazing author and storyteller Gabby Rivera. Gabby shattered all stereotypes when she became the first Latina to write for Marvel, and she created the origin story for Marvel Comics' first Latin American LGBTIQ+ superhero. Gabby will tell us how she found the joy in an intersectional approach to storytelling, and she'll be joined later by an Unstereotype Alliance Deputy Vice Chair, IPG's Heide Gardner.
Hello, UN Unstereotype Alliance. Hi, my name is Gabby Rivera. I am a queer Puerto Rican writer from the Bronx. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am so excited to be here with everyone today. I am honored, I am excited, and I feel blessed. I hope all of you do too. This has been a wildly tough year. And the fact that we can all come together with like all of our capacities, right, is something to celebrate. So first and foremost, I want to celebrate you, all of you coming together and being in community with me here. Like I said, I am a writer. I write young adult fiction, and I am also the first Latina to write for Marvel Comics. Oh! And I want to get into all of the magic and energies and discovering and uncovering that goes into the work that I do and the stories that I tell. There is much conversation about representation and the ways that we must move forward with diversity and inclusion. Everybody wants to be doing the right thing and including all the people. And when it comes to my work and my joy, I am always focused on exploring queerness, my experience of being Puerto Rican in this diaspora, and how I am able to like find rooted joy in all of that. And I think there is a dismissiveness that comes with people trying to understand and explore their identities. And I do not have room for that dismissiveness. When I was younger, my queerness was something that was used to punish me and to push me out of different circles and groups, right? Like when you're a little kid and everyone knows that there's something different about you and everyone knows that you might be like a little baby butch lesbian, nobody says those things to you. Nobody talked to me about it. They talked about me. They made jokes about me. Grown-ups, my classmates, people in church. All of these, I guess you'll call them stereotypes about what a girl is supposed to look like, what a girl is supposed to be like, how she's supposed to learn how to cook and clean and be beautiful. All of those ideas were pushed on me and at the same time wielded as a tool to make me feel small and to let me know that I wasn't welcomed in church, that the other kids, their parents didn't want their kids hanging out with me. All of these things, right? So this queerness that I celebrate now, this queerness that I like weave into all of my stories so that people see themselves and feel love. This queerness was again used against me when I was younger, much like ethnic racial stereotypes, right? Like growing up Puerto Rican in the Bronx. I didn't grow up speaking Spanish. And when I asked my parents why we didn't speak Spanish, me and my brother, why we didn't speak Spanish, it was because they wanted us to have a better life. And when they came to the US and had their accents, right, They were bullied, they were punished, they were brutalized by police, they were kept from getting employment. So we grew up without accents. And I grew up without learning Spanish. And even though that is a colonizer's language, I view it as the language of my grandmothers. And I was kept from it because of my parents' fear of how other people would perceive me and how they would treat me and what I would be allowed to do with my life, access to school or getting in trouble with the police or whatever it is, right? That fear and those worries separated me from a part of like my culture and my understanding. And so in the work that I do, I'm constantly trying to recover and reconnect those bridges and make peace with all of my experiences. And it is not just an internal thing, right? It wasn't just church telling me that being queer was wrong. It wasn't just my mom telling me that young girls should grow up to be good wives. I mean, my mom was also telling me I didn't need a husband and I should make my own way. So mama was just all over the place. It was also me looking out into the world, right? Me looking out into the world and trying to find myself. Who looks like me? Who talks like me? Why is everybody in the movies and TV white? Why, when we watch West Side Story as a family, are the Puerto Ricans not Puerto Rican? Why was Natalie Wood cast as a Puerto Rican when there were hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans in New York, right? Why all the whitewashing? And also, when I finally internally realized that I was indeed queer, lesbian, when I looked out at the media, all I saw was death. I came up in the 80s and 90s, right? So all of our men of color were the predominant image and they were all dying of HIV/AIDS. And when I looked at movies like High Art with Ali Sheedy, where it's about two lesbians who fall in love, they turn to drugs and one of them doesn't make it to the end. Everywhere I looked was like devastation, destruction. You're not going to survive this. We don't care if you die. We don't even want you here type of media, type of stories. And every day I just felt like this world wanted to eliminate me just more and more. From the inside out, from the government to what's happening in my home, from the TV commercials, everywhere, telling me that I don't belong here, I don't exist, and they don't even want me here. And thankfully, I still grew up with a lot of love and a family that loved me no matter what, right? In the middle of all these confusing messages, and I've always written, I was always encouraged to write. My grandmothers, whether they were speaking to me in Spanish and I'm writing in English, they always encouraged that. So in that way, I gathered myself and said, no, I'm writing my own story. I'm writing my own story where the like chubby, beautiful Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx is queer and everybody loves her and nobody shuns her. And not only that, she lives to the end of the story. And she starts off loving her body, loving her curves, loving her brown skin. And no one gets to tell her otherwise. And no one gets to take that from her. I wrote it, about myself, but I also wrote it for all the girls that I grew up being friends with, being cousins with, taking the train with, helping carry their like baby carts down the train steps. Like, it is important for us to maintain our authentic voices, right? And to tell the stories that matter most to us. And not just most because we want to see our pretty faces on TV, but most because we want to live and we deserve to live well. And this is me, right? This is me with my first book, Juliet Takes a Breath. this culmination of a 19-year-old Puerto Rican baby dyke telling her story, falling in love. I indie published this all on my own. And it was the queers and the dykes and the indigenous folks and Black women and feminist thinkers, all the people that they try to tell you that don't matter, all the people that they try to tell you are too liberal or too this, those were the ones loving on me. And I made it a point to never try to impress anybody. I stick to my word, I tell my truths, and my communities support me and follow and rally. And through their rallying, Penguin Random House was like, yo, we love this book. And this is me looking at my book, published officially in hardcover for the first time. And again, I didn't go out of my way to try to please a corporate entity, right? Like, they came to me. And that makes me feel good. And that is the only way I am operating. And it is this book, right? It is me sticking to my truths, making sure that not only my like chubby, beautiful Boricua character loves herself, but that she dives in deep and she asks the questions that I didn't get a chance to ask my grandmothers. Why did they leave Puerto Rico? Why did they only just say it was for a better life? What made them not have a better life there? In this book, Juliet learns that like US corporate interest, greed, political motivations pushed people out of Puerto Rico. That colonization with the land grab and the stealing of the resources, that happened in Puerto Rico too. And all of that's in the book as well. I mean, maybe not all of it, but it's a moment where Juliet learns about this for the first time because they do not teach you this type of history in America. And speaking of America, by the way, real quick, these are my grandmas. You just gotta, I mean, look at these cheeks. You see where I got my cheeks from. It is these two women, right, that birthed me in a sense. But speaking of America, it is through telling my story through Juliet that Marvel Comics reached out to me to give life to their character, America Chavez. So she is the first queer Latina superhero, and I'm the first Latina to write for Marvel. And together, we made magic. Together, I had to ask myself, what do I really want to give America? What does it even mean to be Latinx in outer space? Is that even a thing we get to do? Like, do we have to tie all of our experiences to colonization and trauma in the United States? I don't always have the answers. And I wasn't sure what to do, but the number one thing I knew in my heart that I wanted for the first queer Latina superhero is a moment for her to be able to find her truth, her real truth. And so in this scene right here, what you're looking at is America Chavez, bottom right, and her grandmother. I gave her a grandma. You knew I had to give her a grandma. She didn't have a grandma. I gave her a grandma. But what they're doing here is they're on the ancestral plane. And as a child of the diaspora, a diasporican, if you will, one of the things that like hurts my heart on a regular basis is that I'll never know what Borinquen was like before the colonizers landed, before Columbus, when folks were indigenous, Taínos, Arawaks. It's the same here in the United States. I'll never know what it was like before slavery, colonization. All the history that we have comes from liars and conquerors. And so in this moment here, America Chavez gets to see the history of her people in the sky, in the universe, as is, no BS, unfiltered by others' greed, right? And it's her grandmother that brings her to this space. This is one of my like proudest moments in her origin story. She gets to see her people in the sky as they navigate encountering other alien species, as they navigate birth and life in a matrilineal society, in a universe created by Black and brown spirits. She gets to see it all. And that, to me, is like the heart and the root of what I'm trying to do, what I want all of us to do as we move forward, building new futures and a better world. I want us all to dig deeper, right? Like America Chavez existing now as a comic book character, Juliet Milagros Palante existing in the fictional world, right? Together, I know that that means a better future for other young Latinas, other queer folks. You can't tell me otherwise. And I showed this picture of Puerto Ricans protesting on the islands for many, many, many reasons: corruption, greed, bad government, but also because there were people in power that were trying to eliminate Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico. And we are not having that here. And we are not doing that. None of these colonial conquest islands, like island nations, like we are not going to be silenced. We are not going to let corporate interests and greed and politicians shut us down, take us out. We tell stories in our truth because we want to build a better world. And we want to be independent and free and loving our authentic selves as deeply and as truly as we possibly can. And so in all of my work, I make sure to do that as best as I can. So that when I write stories like Be Free about a chubby little like 13-year-old queer Puerto Rican 200 years in the future, that is my offering. As my offering to all the queer kids of color, saying you deserve to be here, you deserve to be loved and to find yourself and to find your path. You are beholden to your joy, to your light, to your truth. And when we create our own stories, they get to be filled with all of the joy and the magic that our cultures and our ancestors preserved for us, saved for us, remind us to honor. When we tell the truth about our histories, we pave the way for deeper, more vibrant futures where everyone is free. And that is why I'm here today. And if you want to see my dog on Instagram, follow me here. I've got more stories coming. I'm so excited to be in conversation with one of my favorite people in the whole world, Heide Gardner.
And hello to one of my favorite people in the world, Gabby. Thank you so much for that inspiring anthem, if you will, about authenticity and making room for new stories. As you know, the Unstereotype Alliance exists to eliminate the force of archetypes and narrow casting about what roles people can play in the world. You know, it is very much about changing hierarchies so that the world is flatter in terms of who has say so, right? And definitely who has the chance to have their stories heard and to, to be seen and to be valued and to be treated with dignity. So one of the things that really comes across in your story and in the stories that you tell is what happens when a person is literally free from the constraints that many of the companies who are on this probably place on their people when it comes to the storytelling, right? And when I heard from you in this origin story that you created from America, you talked in setting the stage for the joy that you could bring to America and to your audience was you had to get beyond the dismissiveness and, where your identity as a brown woman, as a queer woman was used to punish and exclude you, right? And there was this erasure of who you were and your history. So for those of us who truly want to not just engage or hire diversity, right? But who really want to make it possible for us to benefit from that diversity, instead of shutting it down or using it to punish people. What is your advice for those of us who want to do that?
Heide. It is a wild conversation to have, right? Because I feel like a lot of well-intentioned folks are like, well, if we just hire Black people, Latinos, everything's going to be fine. I want my website to just look like a Benetton ad, everyone's all different colors. And look, we're doing it. We fixed racism, And it's like, okay, but what really needs to happen is folks need to kind of question like where their money comes from. I think that's one of the first things that makes people really uncomfortable because you have to shift power. And when you shift power, that money comes to the forefront and comes into play, right? Like you can have all the greatest diversity and inclusion team in your company. But if the overall corporation is invested in like, taking from the environment or taking from the people, you're not going to get very far. So like people really need to dig deep and find the roots of this power and the root of their money and hold that up for question and make folks be accountable. Like you can't buy your way into diversity. It has to be like a real shakedown and breaking up of these powerful like conglomerates and corporate entities.
So in other words, what I'm hearing from you is that the best intentioned companies in the world, and for us, we're talking about the best intentioned brands, the best intentioned tech platforms, the best intentioned media companies can actually get in their own way. If they're not, if they are not adequately respecting the sources of their revenue. And it sounds like you're also saying they really have to take a look at the impact that they're having on their people, and the world.
Yeah, it's like yes, and like all the work that people are doing in these diversity offices, when I talk to folks, it is the best. People are with it. People in these groups sound so happy, right, to be doing this work. And the ideas are so fresh. And then it's like, it's the higher up, the corporate entity itself that gets in the way up. And so there's just like a disconnect there. And if I can make one media reference, as far as storytelling, Queen Sugar, the show that Oprah produced and Ava DuVernay produced, is incredible storytelling. And at the same time, we learn about the plight and the oppression, right, of Black farmers, and how 95% of land is owned by white folks and 0.03% is owned by Black folks, right? So if you're if you're a white farmer just trying to go for a diversity and inclusion club, that's not gonna help or change the fact that 95+% of the land is owned by this one group. So it's kind of the same thing here when it comes to media, diversity, inclusion. If all the like money holders are big white rich guys, you know, then you're not impacting as deeply the change that you want, even if all your models are of color.
Since we are talking about the power of presence, right, through representation, we're talking about the power of perspectives that you get when you allow people to bring their history and not just their pain, but their joy with them, right? Which means you have to allow that. You can't, you know, hire for diversity and then say, but I don't want to hear about it. You know, I don't want you to bring that sensibility. And then making room, you know, for personality, right? How does that change the world? You know, because we know that it makes money because we have data for advertising for sure that is shown when you have those three things that you have better business results.
Right. But
talk about how your work with those things has actually changed lives. And you know it has.
Yeah, listen, like there are those moments, like there are people, right, who have like read Juliet Takes a Breath, and her last name is Palante. And Palante is a Puerto Rican rallying cry. It's actually a contraction of para adelante. And it is a protest cry saying like, Palante, like we're always coming together, always moving forward, siempre palante, right? It's a rallying cry. And in the book is Juliet's last name, Palante. And this queer family reached out to me, 2 women of color and their 2 children, and they just got married and they changed their name to the Palantes. And like that, that like grabbed my whole heart because it's like, now they carry it as a name, and that Palante rallying cry exists in the future. And it has fortified this queer family to know that they deserve to be here and they belong, and this story was written for them. And the more that we do this work, more families, more people, more young kids will stay here with us and will find their truth and their home. Listen, like LGBTQ kids have high rates of taking their lives, right? And high rates of homelessness. But when I did LGBTQ youth work, the number one thing that kept kids alive was if at least one parent or guardian just still loved them.
Yeah.
Never mind if that parent or guardian knew trans from bi, from this, from that. But as long as that parent still loved them, you keep like a whole generation of kids alive. And so that's how I view this work, as we build stories with authentic voices, reflecting actual cultures, like Nigerian cultures, like queer and trans cultures. Like you are keeping folks alive instead of giving them reasons to go.
I think that's a mic drop. And I want to thank you on behalf of the Unstereotype Alliance, UN Women, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for giving us this time.
Thank you. And also free Puerto Rico all day, every day. Thank you so much.